And welcome back to Resilience Builds. My name is Jake, and today we're going to be looking at Von Burgundy, and I'm going to show you guys how to change out your PCV system and update it with this very simple mod. Magic. Nobody talk. I don't want to hear anybody. I'm very demanding with my YouTube channel. There goes Brady. So how do we know if our PCV system is bad on our red block powered Volvo? Well, some of the first things we can check to see if our PCV system is bad is one, we can do the glove test where we ultimately remove the oil fill cap and then see if we're getting positive pressure by the inflation of like a little nylon glove, or we'll get vacuum, which is what we want if we see that the glove gets suctioned into it. So definitely be careful if you're going to do the glove test. You don't want to have that nylon get sucked into the engine and run around there, but it can be an effective means of testing quickly if our PCV system is bad. Second thing you could check out is if your oil dipstick keeps popping out under boost or full throttle. And so that's a good indicator as well that we are getting positive pressure into the crankcase. Third thing, and probably the most important, you're going to see that you're going to have a lot of oil leaks, especially at the rear main seal. And I'll be showing that under the car here in a second. And so you'll see right between the bell housing on your car, under your vehicle, you'll have a little bit of oil dripping, or maybe a lot, which is a good indicator that your rear main is leaking due to a bad PCV system. So here are the three OEM pieces you're going to need to buy. First you have the oil separator box, the oil return tube, and the oil separator box O-ring. I picked up all three of these items from IPD for under 50 bucks. Next up, you're going to want to grab at least 10 feet of some reinforced nylon tube, as well as some 5/8 fittings adapters, whether that be plastic or brass. I personally like brass for my fittings, as well as you're going to want to make sure that this is 5/8 inner diameter, as this is also going to directly connect up to our stock Volvo oil separator box. And lastly, you have your oil catch can, which I will be making in a separate video, but you can make for as little as $15. Step one of removal is going to be taking the intercooler to intake charge pipe off, which has three major connections at the intercooler, idle air control valve, and the intake. Next, we have the Pcv hoses. The upper hose you can use as shown, but the rest of the line length you're going to want to replace because most likely it's old and brittle and is cracking and may actually lead to leaks. This is also the portion of the PCV system that we're going to be replacing with the 5/8 nylon hose. And this is where the gymnastics begin. There are two 12mm bolts holding the PCV oil separator box to the block. So you're going to have to get in there with a 12mm wrench and slowly, using your hands and wrist, untighten those two bolts and then pop the oil separator box from the block. Now with the PCV box off, you're going to want to clean up those surfaces, and so make sure to put something within those two holes coming from the block to make sure that no gunk gets in there. Now this would usually be the part where I would start reinstalling the new oil separator box. But this just happens to be where the nightmare began. So obviously yesterday did not go as planned. Ultimately what happened is the oil drain tube that the oil separator box connects to, I'd seen this on the forums and I was really hoping it wasn't going to happen, but it did. That thing gets old and crusty and becomes a pain in the butt to get out. Really consider, especially if you're doing your oil change, not taking it out and maybe just putting a little oil on there to help it seal with a new box. What I ran into is ultimately it's just so old and crusty, and as you're picking at it to take the whole thing out, it's not going to. It just seals to the inside of the block. So you can't really get it out very well unless you either have the oil pan off the car and you can go under there and shove it back up or pull it down. So what ended up happening, what I ended up having to do was grab some red RTV, make myself a little gasket on the return side of the oil separator box, and just use that to seal to the block, because I ended up taking probably about an inch of just that rubber oil tube on the old one in the block out, and now it's just straight up shooting down there. Anyway, I just wanted to share that with you guys because this is what working on cars is like. This is just like life. Life is hard. It throws unexpected things at you. You can prepare all you want. I had all brand new products ready to go into this thing to do this job, and it didn't work out. So I want to be honest with you guys as the viewers, as somebody presenting this information, as not going to say that this could be a 20-minute job, but this could also run and become a 3-hour job like what it became for me. And it's not even totally fixed. So let's continue with the process of taking this thing out, and I'll show you guys what I did to update the PCV system, especially for turbo cars, to make it perform better. Final piece for updating your PCV system on your red block Volvo is to add a oil catch can, especially if you have a turbo car. This may not be as necessary if your car is NA, but on a turbo car where you're going to be adding boost to the engine, you're going to get more blow by. Yummy. That's just what happens on boosted vehicles, and especially as the car ages. So you're going to want to add an oil catch can, and the best way to do that is the oil separator box is already sized for 5/8. So as you're going to be able to see here in a second on my line, it's just a 5/8 line all the way for the oil separator box, all the way to the oil catch can, then from the oil catch can back into the intake piping, all 5/8. This is going to promote the most flow from your PCV system back into the intake, so that your intake is only seeing heated, oily air, but no gunk is going to be getting back into the engine, just recirculating oily air back in front of the turbo and feeding it back to the engine, which is going to keep the engine emissions compliant. Hey, thank you guys so much for watching, and if you want to see any more content on Bond Burgundy or some of my car reviews, you can check that out here. And be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and as always, have an awesome day.